As I said, Juki, in my previous remarks, in early Buddhism, schools making the view in the presence of a living Buddha and receiving a prophecy or a prediction was considered the only path to becoming a bodhisattva and a future Buddha, or future Buddhahood. We have all offered 4 bodhisattva vows during the practice in this temple this morning, and we'll continue to offer them, and we'll offer them at the end of this service. The 44 vows being, of course, living beings are numerous. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. The final line, I vow to become it, in this case, is Buddhahood. That's the final line of the contract, if you will. The next question to arise is, where is the living Buddha that will uphold the other part of the contract? Who will confirm the other side of that vow? The lineage of this temple in Zen have lots of Buddhas and ancestors. There are 3 pages of them in the back of that black service book we used earlier today, with the containing the liturgy. There are men and women, Buddhas and ancestors, who precede and follow Shakyamuni Buddha. There are 7 tagged Butsu, or Buddhas, with the remainder titled either Daisho or Acharya, meaning great teacher. All of these are ancestors. More in the ordinary sense, they are, and none are living in what we would consider the ordinary sense of the term being a living Buddha. Dogen, of course, sees things a little bit differently, and that is his gift. He sees the ancestral masters of Zen and the school as all Buddhas, and comments, we should not study that one becomes a Buddha after getting the prediction. We should not study that one gets the prediction after becoming a Buddha. At the time of prediction, there is becoming a Buddha. At the time of prediction, there is practice. We should realize that prediction manifests the self, and that prediction is the self manifested. Therefore, what is inherited by successor after successor of Buddha, and after Buddha's ancestor after ancestor, is nothing but prediction. There is not even a single Dharma that is not prediction. Dogen is telling us that the traditional interpretation is far too narrow. It's not incorrect, but we are already enlightened, and that is the actualization, and that is actualized in practice. Recalling that we do not practice to attain enlightenment, but rather practice because practice is enlightened itself, or enlightenment itself. The perspective emphasizes every action undertaken and can be seen as a form of practice, and thus enlightenment is inherent in daily activities. Considering Dogen's broad perspective on practice and prediction, I might characterize my journey, or what brought me to this practice, as something evolutionary and a mixture of causes and conditions. Some foreseen, others not. Some things that may appear as random, but I choose to see them as a mixture of causes and conditions. I may not be aware of all the causes and conditions, but that doesn't make the outcome, my practice, a purely random thing and outside of Dogen's perspective. My spiritual history involves a family, of course, consisting of two parents and several siblings. One parent I would describe as unchurched, the other, on good days, an agnostic. And while not participating herself, the agnostic parent was very purposeful in getting my sister and myself to church, or pushing us toward it. The other parent's duty was to deliver us to either the church or Vacation Bible School while he sat in the parking lot and read the newspaper on Sunday morning. I also received some exposure to the spirit and form of church, other places such as the High Lutheran Church services on Christmas and Easter with my maternal grandparents. I was quite taken with the forms and liturgy. I liked the Kyrie, the chants, the robes, and even got to kneel. So, practice for bowing, I guess. My father's parents were entirely less formal and unchurched, but they were very caring and supportive. I did receive other messages from family and friends, not necessarily sermons, but attitudes and actions. My father's service in Japan at Yokohama had left him with a very positive attitude about Japan and the Japanese people. Even though his time was limited there, it made a great impression on him. And any travelogue appearing on TV elicited his remembrances of that time there. And my older sister and I were brought in to the living room and seated to see the travelogues and hear the recounting of his experiences several times over the space of our childhood. I was allowed to attend church services fairly eclectically, I guess you'd say, too. My exposure was to Episcopalians, Methodists, and even Pentecostal churches, where I had the good fortune to go and get myself saved. Of course, I was 9 years old, and it seemed like the thing to do. While my early spiritual exposure was really eclectic, there were other things that bubbled up, mainly from my reading. One book that had a very distinct impression on me was John Hersey's recounting of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. I read that when I was about, I don't know, I think maybe 10, 11, and I can still see the cover of the book in front of me, and I can recall the descriptions of the black rain that fell on the survivors. Excuse me. I had the same reaction when I visited Hiroshima in 2017 with a group, so it'll take a second. Thank you. My father never talked about the devastation, but the people and customs, as I said, and that book had a great effect on me. I read it in the 5th or 6th grade, and from there I moved on to other things. In high school, my best friend introduced me to Methodism and acquainted me with the writings of Jack Kerouac, On the Road and Dharma Bums, which got me acquainted with jazz, hitchhiking, and Eastern spirituality, primarily in that order. I still have the first jazz album that I collected in 1963 when I was in the 8th grade, and hitched rides from that point forward up until I was married for the first time in October 31st, 1969. I also remember vaguely a name, D.T. Suzuki, I think it was, from those readings, and I never really picked him up until much later. My entry into college, or at least the selection, may have been for multiple causes and reasons. My parents, my journalism teacher, and a few girls that I knew in the area from having hitchhiked around a bit. And, you know, at 17 years old, you know, there are a lot of things that come in to influence your decisions. As it turned out, I landed in a very fortunate circumstance. I landed at a place, a small church-related liberal arts college called Manchester College, which was essentially, just I could describe it as, in three ways, as very much activistic, a strong streak of pacifism, and an exposure to many things. As it turned out, well, I mentioned too that one of the, as my first exposure to that college, we were required to read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meanings, and respond in a written essay. This was to go to orientation. So, you know, quite a change from high school. And I did a good deal of cutting class while I was in high school. We had a number of our classes in the, being in Indiana, in the gymnasium, which was probably almost the same size as the classroom area because of basketball. So with that, I was expected in college to attend chapel. And, you know, that was not really religious worship. There was some of that. We had an opening prayer, the first chapel of the year, and the closing chapel of the year. But for the most part, we were exposed to a number of different ideas and speakers. 1968 is a very banner year for me, because I remember that year we had both Barry Goldwater, if some of you are old enough to know who Barry was, and Dr. Martin Luther King I heard in person in February. That was just a couple of months before Dr. King was shot in Memphis. Also, too, there was another speaker I heard, small man wearing a black robe, and was a Buddhist. That was more memorable because of the fact that the man's speech was very soft and very accented. He lost his notes and had to do much of what he spoke extemporaneously and off the cuff. And he did find his notes actually out of his sleeve toward the end of his speech. But were that the case, I'm not sure that I would have necessarily come to this practice, but maybe, just maybe, I do remember it, and maybe that is important. We also had I was introduced or reintroduced again to in 1968. I took my first Asian civilization class with Dr. Eldon Burke. Found India, China, and Japan, or at least the history, which seemed to coincide with my earlier exposure and interests. It seemed as if my path, Asia and history, were fairly clear. Of course, I gathered some familiarity with the religions of these areas through classwork, and my initial efforts to go to graduate school in Vietnamese studies at Ohio University were thwarted when, on the same day, this was a couple of years after 1968, of course, but on the same day, the professor who was intending to supply a recommendation and my rejection letter came back, I remember both that day. The question was, where was I supposed to send that letter to? And there was the letter telling me that, sorry, not here. Another professor heard about the situation after I got the rejection letter, and suggested I apply for a seminar in which he was involved at a place called St. Mary of the Woods, Indiana, which is basically the site of a French Jesuit monastery that was established in 1792, literally during the French Revolution, and had, among other things, a working coal mine on it. But we spent 6 weeks there in studying at the South Asian Institute of Studies, and from that I was asked to become offered a graduate assistantship and a chance to study in India the following year. My responsibilities included the collection of learning materials and helping to reestablish new curricula for junior high and middle school students. First thing we had to do was train the teachers, and that was part of my effort to develop those materials, collect them, and I, after returning from India, teaching classes to those folks via the Indiana Higher Education Telecommunications System. And with that trip, I encountered two very significant places in the Buddhist hierarchy, Sarnath and Varanasi. Varanasi was a morning situation. We took a ride on the Ganges to observe people going through morning absolutions prayer, everything from worship to the burning of the dead, and I do remember that. Anyway, to shorten the story a little bit, I returned to the U.S. in my graduate work, and there was a period of over the next 10 years I became a father, left my graduate studies program, flirted a year and a half with becoming a disc jockey, did a program on a station in outside of Terre Haute, Indiana, and managed two separate bars for about 6 years, and went back to pick up an associate degree in computer programming technology. End result being that in 1982, I landed in Harris County, Texas, as a Unitarian and a programmer. Go figure. As it is said, seeds are planted in the Alaya. Some sprout, others germinate, while others wither. Some germinate and grow. The Unitarians offered me, among other things, exposure to Transylvania, Thoreau, and Soto Zen, of all things. There was always an interest in Asia from my father's stories, my own reading and study in the history. The circumstances and travel contributed and continue to accumulate. I'm now in Harris County, Texas, and I'm in my second marriage. And the 11th year of that marriage, my wife Crystal was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I remember the date well. It was January 20th, 2002. What started out as a routine x-ray revealed a shadow, and a day later a biopsy revealed a tumor. It just happened that I was employed by an organization which performed outpatient cancer treatment and supported clinical trials for oncology. Those circumstances allowed me time to support my wife's treatment plan and offered her access to clinical trials that might have otherwise not been available. My employers reached out to their colleagues at MD Anderson and got her into things that otherwise might not have been available. And so that was our process. I was allowed time to attend consultations, infusions, and home care while on the clock. That was another benefit of being accidentally, or not, well, not accidentally, but employed by that particular company. During the period of my wife's illness, we were focused on treatment through attending, and pretty much dropped attending church aside. I could have gone out and gone by myself, but the feeling in my own heart was that I was feeling some distance between myself and a little disconnection with the church. The question of what I might do about spiritually reconnecting had come up in my mind at that time. And I, having had exposure to Asia and its various religions, particularly Buddhism, and through my studies in China and India, I looked around for an English-speaking congregation here in Houston. Noticed only at that time Dawn Mountain at Rice University, filed that away for future reference, and went back to working on the situation with my home life and my wife's illness. Crystal's cancer progressed, and the downside of working with oncologists is that you do know outcomes, statistics, and various things of that nature. So it was evident that we were going to be needing to do a memorial service at the time she was released into hospice care. And it was at that point that we decided to try and reconnect with the Unitarian Church here well, it was actually in the Woodlands that we had attended, where we were married and had sort of stepped away from. And the minister that had been a great friend of ours had retired, so the interim minister was introduced to us, a lady by the name of Paula Gable. And Paula came to our home, met with Crystal and myself to ascertain our wishes about her memorial service. And during those visits, she probably was struck by the fact, the collection of artifacts, my Buddhist and Hindu mandalas, statues, and so forth, my wife's camel statue, or camel seat, and prayer mat. So she did bring up the subject of introducing me to her husband, Phil, and who happened to be a practicing Soto layperson and was in the process of sewing his rakusa and preparing for Jakai at the Austin Zen Center. I did meet him in September and went on to be involved with a Buddhist study group, a fledgling Sangha, and was also introduced to the nucleus of this group that was meeting at the Unitarian Church on Fannin Street. I attended Friday night study group at the beginning called the Beginner's Mind Sangha on Sunday. Over the course of the year, I gradually moved into practice here. And behind the scenes, there were efforts being to organize a permanent temple and to call a resident teacher. I began attending with good friends. I met in the Woodlands practice group. I was able to split my time Friday at the Buddhist study group, Saturday at 12:44, Sunday at the Unitarian Church. I undertook religious education for junior high kids, and Sunday night sitting again with Buddhists, either at the Fannin Street Church or in the Beginner's Mind Sangha. And in 2004, I asked to begin sewing my rakasa. I did so with a Dharma group, or my Dharma litter, Brian Burrell, Bruce Mills, and Patricio Puente. Moving on, I'm going to just kind of quickly summarize. I've made a number of good friends through this practice. Studied, often feeling that Manjushri's sword was dulled by his use of it on my shoulders. And I myself continued to offer myself and my services in hospice work, in volunteer work, in teaching classes, offering my practice. Returning to Dogen's interpretation of practice embodying enlightenment, and practice being also the activities of daily life, and both in turn reflecting prediction, my journey seems to fit into Dogen's perspective as a prediction or a confirmation. In other words, our diligent effort expressed through our study, our practice, and our activity, forms and ceremonies is prediction, and it is tied to the ancient predictions like the vow raised by Buddha, the Sakyamuni Buddha, who said, "I awaken with the great earth and all beings." There are a number of options for receiving prediction. There are 8 that the Buddha himself lists. There are 4 you might remember in the form of a tetralemma from weeks back. In this case, it's saying, though there are predictions that are known by the near, there are predictions that the far know. There are both predictions known by the near and far, and there are predictions known by neither the near or far. Anyway, Dogen goes on to say, you are also like this, I am also like this. Prediction is a sign. Prediction is ambiguity. Prediction is a face breaking into a smile. Prediction is living and dying, going and coming. Prediction is the whole universe in the 10 directions. Prediction is the entire universe and having nothing hidden. From Shakyamuni's statement, I awaken with the great earth and all beings, is a prediction. Dogen concludes that particular fascicle with a reprimand to Vimalakirti, which I found interesting. During the encounter with Maitreya, Vimalakirti asks whether Maitreya, in which life he had received his prediction, whether it was the present, the past, or the future, and that none of which were appropriate. And that must have been that he received it in enlightenment or nirvana, or the birthless state. And again, that was not appropriate because there is nothing in the birthless state. Dogen comes back in to say, Maitreya missed the point, that the point was that prediction, that enlightenment is itself prediction, and that is what's to be known. According to Dogen, and I conclude that we have, along with all beings, no matter whether we know it or not, we have all received a prediction. We actualize it in sitting and in practice. When I conclude my understanding of what brought me to this practice, that I conclude is a number of things, but the act I'm going to do now, which is to put our hands together, honors Dogen's predictions and reminds that we all have received that same prediction. Thank you.